Good morning, dear students. I am Ms. Navida Sheikh from Brahan Mumbai Mahanagar Palika MCGM virtual class. I welcome all my dear students to another and interesting session. In today's session, we'll be learning something new and interesting from a science textbook. So let's get started. I, Ms. Navida Sheikh, will be teaching gravitation today. We have already learned a few part of gravitation chapter in our previous session, and today we'll be continuing with the remaining part of the chapter, which is very interesting. And let's get started with this chapter, gravitation. This lesson we'll be talking more about Kepler's law. Now, initially, people were very curious about how the planets are moving, or how the sun, where the sun is placed, where the planets are moving. That all was a big debate going on. But after a few years, Ptolemy, he was a person who came up with a geocentric theory stating that the earth at the center of the universe, okay, the earth is at the center of the universe and all the planets and the sun are moving around it in a circular orbit, okay, circle. Everybody can see in a circular orbit. But after few years, there was another person. He was a Polish monk. He was Copernicus. He stated that the earth is not in the center. He came up with a heliocentric theory, which states that the sun is at the center of the solar system and that all the planets, including the earth, revolve around it in a circular orbit. Again, here also both of them are saying circular orbit. But after few years, we had a person named Johannes Kepler. He came up with few planetary motion laws. Okay, he came up with Kepler's law. It was named after it. First law was law of orbit, second law of areas, and third is law of periods. Now this was all based on his observation. Now the first law of orbit states that all the planets revolve in elliptical orbits with sun at one of the foci of the ellipse. Okay, means the sun is in the center. We'll be understanding this with the help of an experiment here. You will need a paper sheet and two paper pins. You will mark 2 points F1 and F2 on the paper and place the 2 pins over it. Now you take a string and place a small ring into it. Once you do this, you have to mark points F1 and F2. These are the foci. Now take a small pencil which can go through the ring. Stretch the ring. Once you have done that, make a line using this. You have to remember, you have to keep the string stretched throughout. Now this path that you see which you have drawn with the pencil is known as the ellipse. Okay, the shape that you see is known as the ellipse. F1 and F2 are the foci. Okay, so with this I hope it is clear. Now the line that is passing through the foci, O, is called as the center of the ellipse. Okay, now the point, any point P on this ellipse, that is P F1 or P F2, when you add them it will be constant. The distance will be constant. Here you can see the sun is placed at any foci, whether it is F1 or F2, we are placing it on F1, and the earth is, or the any other planets, they are revolving around this elliptical orbit. Okay, so this was the very first law of orbit stated by Kepler. So now, according to Kepler's second law of planetary motion, which is also known as the law of areas, according to this law, the line joining the sun and a planet sweeps equal areas in equal interval of time. Now consider a planet moving around the sun in this orbit, we will take point P1 and P2 as two start and end points, which covers a 30 days duration of the Earth's revolution, and A1 will be the area covered within these days. Similarly, we'll take point P3 and P4 as the 2 points of the Earth revolution for about 30 days, and A2 will be the area covered within these days. Now, according to this law, the area 1 will be equal to area 2. So in this third law, that is Kepler's third law of planetary motion, is also known as the law of period, which states that the square of its period of revolution around the sun is directly proportional to the cube of the mean distance of a planet from the sun. It can also be denoted as t square is directly proportional to r cube, where t is the time taken for the revolution of the planet around the sun, and r is the mean distance of a planet from the sun. Okay. So with this, I hope all three laws given by Kepler were clear to all my students. So now we move on to the next and a very important topic, that is Newton's universal law of gravitation. Now, with all the consideration, even including the Kepler's law, Newton led to formulate his theory of universal gravity, where he stated that according to this theory, every object in the universe attracts every other object with a definite force. This force is directly proportional to the product of the masses of the two objects and is inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. Here in this figure, there are two objects with masses m1 and m2, and they are kept at a distance of d from each other. Mathematically, the gravitational force of attraction between these two bodies can be written as F is m1 m2 upon d square, where you can get this equation written as F is equal to G into m1 m2 upon d square. Now here G is known as the constant of proportionality and is called the universal gravitational constant. Okay. Now in the above law, it means that the mass of one object, if it is doubled, then the force between the two objects will also double. On the other hand, if the distance is doubled, the force decreases by a factor of 4. Now, if the bodies are spherical, the direction of the force is always along the line joining the center of the two bodies, and the distance is taken as d, okay, between the centers. But if the objects are not spherical or have irregular shape, the direction of the force is along the line joining the center of mass, and d is taken to be the distance between the two center of mass. Now with the equation that we got, F is equal to G into m1 m2 upon d square. Now from this equation, it is seen that the value of G is the gravitational force acting between two unit masses kept at a unit distance away from each other. Now in SI unit, the value G is equal to the gravitational force between two masses of 1 kg kept 1 meters apart. Okay. The center of mass of an object is the point inside or outside the object at which the total mass of the object can be assumed to be concentrated. The center of the mass of the spherical object having uniform density is at its geometrical center. The center of mass of any object having uniform density is at its centroid. Now centroid, you all have learned this in your maths, so I hope you can recall what we're talking about. I hope this much is clear. Let's continue ahead. Okay, so the next and important thing, Earth's gravitational force. Now, this boy is playing with a stone. So, will the velocity of a stone thrown vertically upward remain constant, or will it change with time? How will it change? Why doesn't the stone move up all the time? Why does it fall down after reaching a certain height? What does its maximum height depend upon? Let's get a few answers to these questions. So, the Earth attracts every object near it towards itself because of the gravitational force. The center of the mass is of the Earth is situated at its center. So the gravitational force on any object due to the Earth is always directed towards the center of the Earth. Because of this force, an object falls vertically downwards on the Earth. Similarly, when we throw the stone vertically upwards, this force tries to pull it down and reduces its velocity. Due to this constant downward pull, the velocity becomes zero after a while. The pull continues to be exerted and the stone starts moving down vertically towards the center of the earth under its influence. Now you have to use your brain. According to Newton's law of gravitation, every object attracts every other object. Thus, if the earth attracts an apple towards itself, the apple also attracts the earth towards itself with the same force. Why then does the apple fall towards the earth but the earth does not move towards the apple? Let us get a few answers to this question. Now, according to Newton's law, the gravitational force due to the earth also acts on moon because of which it revolves around the earth. The similar situation exists for artificial satellites orbiting around the earth. Say, if the moon and the artificial or satellites they are orbiting, this is because the earth attracts them towards itself. But unlikely the falling apple, they do not fall on the earth. Why? Because they have got velocity. This is because of the velocity of the moon and the satellites along their orbits. If this velocity was not there, they would have fallen on the earth. So the next topic, which is also very interesting, that is free fall. Now for doing this, we need to hold a stone in the hand. Take a small stone and hold it in your hand. Now, which forces are acting on the stone? Now release the stone. What do you observe? What are the forces acting on the stone after you release it? We know that the force of gravity due to the earth acts on each and every object. When we were holding the stone in our hand, the stone was experiencing this force, but it was balanced by a force that we were applying on it in the opposite direction. As a result, the stone remained at rest in our hand. Once we release the stone from our hand, the only force that acts on it is the gravitational force of the earth, and the stone falls down under its influence. Whenever an object moves under the influence of the force of gravity alone, it is said to be falling freely. Thus, the released stone is in a free fall. In this, the initial velocity of the object is zero and it goes on increasing due to the acceleration due to gravity of the earth. During free fall, the frictional force due to air opposes the motion of the object and the Bion force also acts on the object. Thus, true free fall is only possible only in vacuum. Okay, so this can hinder into the experiment that we are actually trying. Let's continue. We will see that the moon and the artificial satellites which are moving around the earth only under the influence of the gravitational field of the earth. Did you know that the value of g is the same for all objects at a given place on the earth? whether it is small or big. Thus, any two objects, irrespective of their masses or any other properties, when dropped from the same height and falling freely, will reach the earth at the same time. For this, Galileo is said to have performed an experiment around 15,090 in the Italian city of Pisa. He had taken two spheres and he dropped the two spheres of the different masses from the Leaning Tower of the Pisa to demonstrate that both spheres reach the ground at the same time. Here you can see both are of the different masses. But when we drop a feather and a heavy stone at the same time, from the same height, do not reach the earth at the same time. Why? Because the feather experiences a buoyant force and a frictional force due to the air and therefore floats and reaches the ground slowly later than the heavy stone. Now here, the buoyant and the frictional force on the stone are much less because of the weight of the stone, and it does not affect the speed of the stone much. So, recently, scientists have performed this experiment in vacuum and showed that the feather and stone indeed reach the earth at the same time. Here you can see vacuum means they have removed all the air. The entire atmosphere has been removed and they are doing this experiment over there, and here you can see they reach at the same time. Okay, so I hope this concept is also clear to you. Today's session was quite useful and interesting. Please see to it that you'll keep reading your textbooks and revise with the help of this video. Thank you.
If you liked our video, please subscribe to our channel and do not forget to hit the like button.
Hope this session was quite useful to you. In the next coming period, we'll learn something new and interesting. Till then, thank you.